So time now to go through the morning papers, and here with me to review them this morning are journalist and broadcaster Afia Hagan and academic Joanna Williams. So very good morning to both of you. Lovely to see you both this morning. And we've got a mixture of stuff on the front pages, haven't we? Mostly it's strikes or football. That's very broadly speaking. There are a few other stories and some of which you've picked out. But let's kick off with the strikes element, shall we? And Afia, you've picked out the I first of all, and this is really focusing on the NHS and the pressures it's under.
Yes, absolutely. So the headline here is NHS winter crisis erupts after years of warnings. And it feels like we've been talking about the mess that the NHS has been in for such a long time, as the headline alludes to. You've got 1 in 8 people in the UK on a waiting list at the moment, waiting for various operations, whether that's hip replacements, knee replacements, whatever that may be. And of course, because you have the strikes looming, lots of routine operations are going to be cancelled. In this piece, you've got paramedics talking about they fear the time when someone's having a cardiac arrest and they won't be able to help them. There's warnings from paediatric about significantly increasing number of kids coming through A&E with respiratory problems this year. Of course, we all know about strep A and the effect that has had. Around 15 deaths so far. Antibiotics there's a shortage of antibiotics. The ones we have are now very, very expensive. And so all of these things are coming together, of course, after the pressure of the pandemic as well, which pushed waiting lists up, which meant that children were less exposed to respiratory viruses, which means that we have an increase in things like strep A, leading to those deaths, leading to those the worries of parents up and down the country. It's a perfect storm, if you will. Temperatures dropping this weekend as well, which may mean more falls, which may mean more people coming in with respiratory viruses as well. It's all linked. And it's come to the point, I think, where it's coming to a head. And at this time that we do seem to be in this winter of discontent, where we are living within broken Britain, where the railways don't work, where the Royal Mail doesn't work, where the NHS doesn't work. It's a pretty miserable time, but people are also very, very worried about any routine operations that they may have, but also very worried if they get into an accident, if they have a cardiac arrest. Will the resources be available on behalf of the NHS to be able to potentially save their lives? It's a very, very worrying time.
Yeah, and Joanna, if we move on to the Times, they focus on the railway strikes. And I guess the question is now of to what extent the public have sympathy with people going on strike, and whether or not there are frustrations building. And the government is obviously trying to put pressure on the unions to hold off on their strikes for the sake of the public. It'd be interesting to see whether public opinion shifts at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really is the key question, because what's been proposed here is a ramping up of action away from just the strike days to actually imposing an overtime ban. And what surprised me to discover this morning reading the paper was just how much of our rail network is reliant upon people putting in overtime, and presumably that's been mutually beneficial for a number of decades. People who work for the railways have benefited from having extra paid overtime supplementing their wages. But clearly this is no way to be running a railway, a national railway infrastructure, dependent upon kind of goodwill of people in this way. I think the problem is back in the 1970s, 1980s, we actually had an awful lot more days lost to strikes than we have now. And I guess people got used to it, and people were organising their lives around the assumption that strikes could happen. And this is something that in the most recent decades we've just not been used to at all. We've had record low numbers of strikes, and I think we do have to remember that workers go on strike as a last resort. People are not paid when they're on strike. People are taking the rail workers and obviously Royal Mail and health service, so many different people are going on strike right now. They take a financial hit. They're taking a financial hit when they're faced with all the same cost of living pressures that everybody else is facing now. And I think we also need to ask ourselves why they are making these claims for pay. It's because we are facing record levels of inflation. We've got escalating fuel prices, food prices. Everybody is really feeling these cost of living pressures. I actually really agreed with the points Afia was making earlier about the consequences of lockdown. We're now paying the economic cost of lockdown, if you like. And it does seem very unfair to me that that should fall disproportionately on people who did actually work throughout lockdown. You know, people, doctors, nurses, railway workers, they weren't sitting at home. You know, they were having to go out to work throughout lockdown. So the idea that they now have to pay by having spiralling inflation, escalating cost of living, and wages that are just not keeping pace seems to me very unfair. So whilst I do completely understand why commuters, holiday makers, travellers, shoppers are really losing sympathy with the strikers, I actually think it's important that we do maintain some sympathy and some understanding for their cause.
Yeah, and in the Financial Times, the Chancellor is saying that trade unions shouldn't jeopardise Britain's recovery, saying that high pay demands will hit the fight against inflation and harm the workers they're trying to protect. So they're putting that argument forward as well, aren't they? OK, let's very briefly, if we can, because we've only got a short amount of time, touch on the Daily Express's front page, if we can, Afia. This is basically fallout from Harry and Meghan's first 3 programmes coming out.
Yes, absolutely. So there was some comment in the first 3 episodes about the Commonwealth. And so the High Commissioner of Gabon, one of the latest countries to join the Commonwealth, has said that it was surprising and patronising for Harry and Meghan to use their Netflix series to criticise the Queen's life's work. He said, to think we would sign up blindly to be vassals to another empire is to suggest that we are foolish. And that is in reply to comments in the programme that the Commonwealth is sometimes seen as Empire 2.0. And I think, you know, there's a real difference of opinion when it comes to the Commonwealth from the benefits of it. There's a saying that in the Commonwealth the wealth is not common, that in fact that countries that sign up are still as poor as they were 50 or 100 years ago, but you still have countries signing up today who find it to be very beneficial.
Yeah, a really interesting debate around that. Very briefly, Joanna, a number of the front pages, including the Star, the Mirror and the Sun, all going with tonight's football match. We've got about 20 seconds. Looking forward to it?
I really am, and anybody who watched last night's match between Argentina and the Netherlands had a kind of appetizer, if you like, of a very mad football match. Hopefully this will be just as fun.
Exactly. It's certainly going to be interesting, isn't it? I'll see you both again in the next hour. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.